This is Scott Becker with the Becker Private Equity Podcast and the Becker Business Minute Podcast. Thrilled today to visit with Rick Kess. We're going to talk to Rick today about leadership in challenging times. We're seeing more and more leaders, particularly in technology companies, some in the big conglomerates, look at layoffs, look at more challenges, worrying more about recession and so forth. Rick, you've been a long-term partner at RSM, brilliant centered business person and leader. Take a moment. Any advice that you would give to leaders in sort of changing times or challenging times? Any thoughts for leadership?
Yeah, I mean, at RSM, I mean, we've been a very high growth accounting firm. We've grown quite a bit over the last 10, 15 years. And, I think because of that, we've always been kind of in a hiring mode and, really trying to grow. And I think, with some of the economic impacts that you're talking about, I think some people think, well, what happens if we're not growing at the rate we have been, and, some of the uncertainty that might bring. And, I think a lot of us in the partner group really try to make sure we think about, what messages are we sending to our people, even by actions or decisions we're making. Like if we're starting to, change our behavior, does that create, some unintended consequence that people start to feel like, their jobs at jeopardy or their ability to grow within the firms at jeopardy. So I think really thinking about everything that you're doing, I think some simple things like, if a business all of a sudden stops, doing like a holiday party, what signal does that send? Does it send a signal that we can't afford a holiday party? And, there's a question about our ability to continue to do the things we want to do as a company, or, does it send a signal like, hey, no one showed up to the holiday party and we don't want to waste our money on it? So I think it's really important to think about every action and decision you make as a leader, and how your people are going to kind of think through that and interpret what that means. Because unfortunately, people overthink every decision you make sometimes. And, perhaps as leaders, we need to overthink some of the decisions we make, other than just kind of making, emotional or rash decisions so that, we may, at the time get what we want, but not understand what that means to our people.
This point, I'm trying to understand how you and what you say is going to be perceived is so important. I saw a beautiful article about the CEO of Google. And Google, Sundar Pichai is the CEO, and he had to do an announcement about layoffs. And the article talked about how he handled that announcement. And the point that he had made was, it wasn't just virtue signaling to Wall Street that we're going to be more profitable. He said in his announcements, everybody who's being laid off has already been told. And this small difference in how that was handled versus how most companies handle it. Most companies make a big announcement to Wall Street and say, we're going to conduct layoffs, but they haven't yet told people who's going to be laid off. So that leads to a tremendous amount of fear within the company. In this example of leadership, of how things are going to be approached, obviously saying you're doing layoffs sends multiple signals to Wall Street. It says we're working more on profitability. It says we might be having challenges, but it sends multiple messages. But more important than Wall Street is what it means to your people who may be affected by it. And I thought this concept, and it goes right in line with what you're talking about, is how are we acting and what does that mean for our people? What does that mean for our teams is so important. And when a CEO says we've already told people we're being laid off, it takes a big breath out of the air. It's still horrible. It's still sad for those people that are losing their jobs, but at least tells everybody else right now, at least for this moment in time, your job is safe. And I think that is just a fascinating perspective on this concept of what are we signaling to people? What are we telling people? How are they hearing it? How are they feeling it? Rick, any other thoughts on leadership in challenging times?
The other thing that I think has been a common theme of discussion amongst the partners I work with is, I think some of us have a belief that, the world has changed dramatically in the last 3 years. People want more flexibility and they want to be able to work where they want to work and how they want to work. And, I think there's a school of thought that believes that, hey, if we get our people back in the office, they'll get back to the productivity levels pre-COVID, and, they'll act and react the way that, people did, in 2019. And I think the alternative way of thinking about that is no, it's not going to go back. People have changed, and we need to accept that the world is different today than it was 3 years ago, and the way people learn and the cultures and how we build culture and all those things that we are accustomed to doing pre-COVID, a lot of that's no longer going to be possible. So I think, the mindset of like, well, if we just get people back in the office and we just do this and we start kind of getting back to who we were pre-COVID, we'll get all the things we wanted to get, and I think that's just not going to happen, in my opinion. I think we just need to realize that we're probably not going back to that environment, and maybe we shouldn't even, consider it. And we should just accept the fact that we have to start figuring out how to create culture and how to create relationships and do the things that, we've been doing for the last 3 years for the rest of, our business cycle. So I think that mindset, I think, is slowly evaporating, that we need to get our people back here, and we need to do this, we need to do that, so that, we can continue to kind of think through what's the real future look like, and what do people really want and need, and really achieve those goals.
But your point is really a really interesting question or point, because there certainly are some people or some firms that very much are pushing hard, whether it's JP Morgan Chase, whether it's Disney, whether it's Elon Musk's set of companies that are really trying to push people, Twitter and Tesla, to get people back to work in person. And then as a big professional services firm, it seems to be a huge mix out there, and people would love to have their people learning and working in teams and closer together. At the same time, they very much realize that people love their freedom, and they also, if they're competing against other firms that are not requiring people to be in person, it's a competitive disadvantage to recruiting the most talented people, which is often everything, is having the best and brightest around that are hardworking and focused. So it is a really challenging set of questions for leaders, isn't it?
Oh yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. And I think the funny thing too, I think people, fail to think about is, how much do you as a leader want that flexibility? I mean, how dependent are you on the ability to work from home for a day if you have, maybe a service appointment on your refrigerator or something like that, right? Like, so, I think we as leaders, have to realize that we want that freedom and flexibility too. And if we want it, that probably means our people want it as well.
Well, and this is one of the great points. There's an old joke about minor surgery. Minor surgery is someone else that's having surgery. There's an old joke about a recession. A recession is somebody else that loses their job. When you talk about what you're talking about, this going back to work thing, it is, and this is no negativity to Jamie Dimon or Bob Iger or Elon Musk, and they're in different positions. I'll grant you that. But when they say everybody should be back to work, they certainly don't mean themselves. That everybody should be back to work in person, they certainly don't mean themselves, correct? I mean, they mean everybody else, the rank and file, should be back at work in person, but not them. And that's not necessarily here nor there, because there might be good reasons for the difference. But when you point out the CEO wants that flexibility, wants to be able to sort of go where they have to go when they have to go, versus what they want for others. It's a very different thing, and it does cause tremendous stress and tension in organizations, and some level of disconnect and dissonance too, doesn't it? Where some group of people are told to get back, some are not, and that causes some challenges, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think getting to the tone at the top, and leadership, really does trickle down, and the way you act is the way that your direct reports act, and then the way that their direct reports act. So I think creating a fair and balanced culture is to me is really important. I think I've only worked at RSM, so I can't speak for other firms, but I know at RSM it feels like our leaders are leading that way, where we're saying the same things to each other as we're saying to our people, and I think that's just a really good culture to have, and creates a feeling that everybody's playing from the same spot, and that I think that's the way we, at least as a culture, want to kind of establish.
The next time we talk, I'd love to talk to you about the kind of culture at a firm that a firm has to have, where somebody makes a life of being at that firm. Would love to talk to you about that. I've been at the same firm for 30 years. You've been at RSM your entire career. Would love to talk about that because that's so unusual today. And we'd love to talk about the culture of the firm, the culture of the person. What leads to that sort of situation where somebody stays their entire career at one place, and why, when it works, it could be so magical for a career? Rick, I want to thank you for joining us today on the Becker Private Equity and Becker Business Minute podcast. Just fantastic to visit with you. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it.